Today we're going to talk about the components of a job, and specifically I'm going to go into detail on how the components work together and how you can use them together. So the first thing that I'm going to show you guys is job options, right? So how we can prompt the user for information during a job, and also how we can put options to run the job into a job without actually exposing the option to the user. I want to talk about node variables and using those variables within the job, and how to create better output for your users. So people who might not be familiar with the command line will want to have reports, etc., that are human readable instead of just, standard output. And then finally, I'm going to go into a little bit about orchestration and how we can use logic to select the nodes where we're running it. So first, I've set up a demo environment for today. And as you can see, I have a lot of jobs already. So I just want to explain a little bit about my demo environment before we get into the details of the use cases that I'm going to talk about. So this is actually a logistics, it's a logistics API that is supposed to be running in production. We have 3 Nginx servers, a load balancer, and a backend database. And just gonna see, okay. And as you can see, I've set up health checks so I can tell that each of my nodes are actually healthy and running. So interruptions during the day, right, to add users to the backend database from business analyst is kind of a constant problem in the environment. We have, periodically the operations people will have to be adding the users to the API. So what we did was create a self-service job, right, that the business analysts can use. So they really can't use the command line or anything. So this gives them a nice GUI where they can just enter the information about a user directly into the GUI. And use my Rundeck email. And have some pick list, right? Freeform text entering email address, which we're actually validating the email address, and I'll show you that on the back end. And we also have in here something that, like, once a country is selected, it's going to give me a pick list of the provinces within that country. So if I were to change this to a different area, like the United States, you'll notice that right now the states are showing. So we'll show you how to set that up. And I'm just going to go ahead and run this job with these options. And you can see that this user already exists. I already put myself in there. So if I wanted to execute the job again, right, they can actually just click that run again, and it will pre-populate with whatever was selected before. And we'll talk about why that's important in a minute. So just want to show you success, right? And now you can see that it created a new user. So let's look at the details of how I set this up. So we're using workflow options, which can be variables. So the way we add users is actually right through a HTTP request. And we're giving them the ability to run this ad hoc at any time. So I'm going to go in and look at this. So this is actually a free-form text field, right? But we're validating the input using a regular expression, and we're actually requiring them to enter it. So as far as options go, this job actually contains most of the options, right? The other fields, as you can see, go here, right, are just required fields that they can enter any information. And then one thing that you guys may not have known, right, is here I have a pick list, and I've just typed in the countries that are available. But within job options, we could actually, they execute in order. So if I had the list that I want to filter, the provinces, I've set this up so it's going to take whatever the user selected in the previous option, and then it's going out to this URL, and it's actually going to filter based on the value that they select. So a lot of customers that I run into, there's a more complicated way that you can actually set up pick lists that will dynamically change as user makes selection. But I think it's kind of a hidden feature of Rundeck that we can actually use the option, right, within that was selected in a previous field, right, within something like this. Okay. And then roles is just a regular, right, pick list, so they can choose one or more. And when we use these within our steps, you'll notice at the bottom of each of the options that you set, it tells you, right, how you can use this within your job. So any place in here, like this is, I'm actually going to open this if it let me, yep. So within here, within the body of this HTTP post, right, I'm simply taking the information from the options and using that within the post. So the user will make their selection, and when they click for this to run at runtime, what it's going to do is it just is going in and finding and replacing these and then running the job. Okay. So you may have noticed, or if you guys have ever used this HTTP request step before, what it would return is JSON, right? And I'm not going to show what that would look like, but it would just be a JSON string. And because we're trying to, you know, give a job that analysts could use, we really wouldn't want to show them like that standard output of JSON, right? They wouldn't know how to read it. So let me just close some of these things up. Oh, and all of these jobs are actually available within our discard changes I made. All of these jobs are available within our test environment. So, and we could send you the definitions. So this format on its own without a log filter, and you configure log filters, right, by you can configure them per step, or you can configure them for the entire job. Just click the add a log filter. And in this case, what I'm doing is rendering the format. So it's going to take, right, I'm telling it what the data type that's going to be returned is, right? It's JSON, and I just want to sanitize it and show it in a table. Okay. So log filtering, maybe you wouldn't think of that as, it's the way that we're going to create reports, right, for the user. So let's look at another way that I've used log filtering in this environment. So I'm going to go back to jobs and we'll run the job. So we have some other users who are like developers in the environment, and they might be, the business operators might say, oh, it's running slow, right, or the service is down. So we have some reports that those developers can run to find out, you know, how the services are doing in the environment. And you'll notice that we don't have any node selection here. So if I run this report, we still don't want to give the users that log output that's showing in all of the steps we're running, right, and all of the checks we're doing. We simply want to just return the status. So how do we accomplish this, right? So this is really nice and easy. If one of these processes were down, it's going to return a red status. So they would know that, oh, there's a problem, right? Here's the server it's on, and we need to restart the service. And they have the jobs to do that as well. So if I go up here and I click edit, we can look at how I accomplish this. So within log filtering, we have a filter called progress badge. And what this really does is it sanitizes the output so that the user is just going to get the status, right? Whether it failed or passed. And it's going to look at this level when we set it at the global level, right? It's going to tell us for every step. So for the entire job as it's running on each node, did all of the steps pass or fail? So this is really great for those self-service jobs, right? Where we can allow the user to maybe do some complicated things on the back end, but give them a really simple, easy to understand response. Click cancel. Okay. So we do have the ability to, if I look into the service performance check, I'm going to go ahead and run this now and run it on all the nodes. Right. We can just show them the direct output as well without any filtering. Right. But typically in an environment, what I would want to do if I was handing this out to more kind of end user type of people is sanitize it by making it into a report. Okay. So the next thing that we run into a lot is, so here's a job where our analysts every night are putting a bunch of files into a directory, and we have a job that runs every night, and it goes out to that directory and it gets those files and it uploads them and it rebuilds the catalog. Of course, sometimes they don't always do it, like they forget or they have an emergency, something that needs to be added right away. So we've given them the ability to go ahead and put that file in there and then come here and run their job. So when we click run now, it's going to go out and grab that file, upload it to the database, and then again, this is I believe it's JSON, right? It's sanitizing it so that they can understand, yes, look, I rebuilt it, and here we go, our results, we validated it. So we don't want to give analysts any credentials to the database, right? We don't want them to know about the password. We don't want them to have to pick a password or anything. And this is what I was talking about. You can add options that are hidden from the user. So in this case, in order to run this job, right, you can see that we're using a database password within the job. And actually it's here, right, within our catalog rebuild. So the password is securely stored in Rundeck, right, and the key storage as password. And we can set up that option, right, to use the secure password, and we can give it the path. Now, the user doesn't have to have any knowledge about that a password's even being used in the script, right? Because we can say, yes, just hide this so the script can run. There we go. So when we're using passwords, what Rundeck is doing with all of these options from above is it's really doing a find and replace on these items within the script itself. And we wouldn't want to expose that password in the log output if we were showing them log output. in order to, so let's go ahead. Here we go. Right, we can see here that we have another log filter, and I'm gonna click cancel on this. Right, so we're gonna set up a log filter, right, that's going to replace within our scripts just in case they did happen to get the log output, like they ran it in debug mode or whatever, that it's going to use the password, but it's going to replace it with secure instead. And in this case, it's outlining it as magenta. Okay. And by default in 3.1, you don't have to set up mass passwords because for all jobs within the project, this is the default setting that it automatically applies this log filter. You can actually turn that off if for some reason you were testing and you wanted to expose the passwords and see how Rundeck was doing the replacement, like if there were any problems with that, you can do that within your project setting configuration. And okay, and as I'm talking about these topics, Nathan is putting links to documentation and videos because we have a short amount of time, so I'm trying to go through some of these topics pretty quickly. Okay, so another kind of thing that I've run into with customers, I'm going to go ahead and leave this page, is that maybe they want to have a way that the nodes that are targeted by a job are based on one of these options, right? So I'm going to show you one more way to use the options variable. So remember, in my environment, I said my environment's made of HA proxy, MySQL, and Nginx. So if I want to restart one of these services, I can actually use a node filter based on the option, and it does show like this in the UI, right? So whatever the user selects here, this is going to be the target, right, of where I'm trying to restart the service. So if I go ahead and restart that, we can see it only chose the HA proxy node. So let's go ahead and look at how I set that up. This is relatively straightforward. Right, I have my option, which is just a pick list of the services that I'm allowing the user or the developers to restart. I'm going to use the command line argument, and on my node filtering, all I'm going to do, and this happens to be a tag, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but right, this is an attribute of my node, so I'm just filtering based on, again, using this variable. So at runtime, for each node, for the node selection, right, when we click run, Rundeck is going to go ahead and replace this variable, so it's the correct filter. So let's go back to my workflow for a minute, and we'll talk about this. So if you're looking at the job options, there's various levels, right, at which we can do this variable replacement. So within steps, and I think it kind of talks about the context and the documentation, right? We can actually use any of the node attributes. So in this case, for each of my nodes in my environment, I've added a tag called service, right? And that is the value is the service name that I want to use within my restart command. So any of those node attributes at runtime are available to you. So cancel. Okay, so the final use case, well, actually there's two, but the final use case that I wanted to talk about is, so say we didn't have a load balancer for our job, right? to add a user to the API, and we were just going directly into one of those 3 machines. So we wouldn't want to run this job, right, on 3 target nodes. We only want to add the user once, and we don't really care which node we run it on. So in this case, we can use the orchestrator to pick a node, and you may remember that I said health checks, right? I have set up health checks so that I know whether my nodes are in a healthy state or not. So let's look at how, and yeah. Anyway, I'll just go straight into editing the job. I'll run it next after I fill out the form, right? So we go over to nodes, right? I've written the filter again, right? We've seen this filter before to only find nodes that have the service Nginx, right? Because that's where our post is going to work to. And I'm excluding any node where Nginx, where the node itself is reporting under my health checks as being unhealthy. So I only want to pick one of these nodes, and for that, I can actually use the orchestrator. So what the orchestrator does is it's going to take what I've filtered up here and has a couple of options, right? And I'm using random subset. So I just want to run this job on one healthy node, right? And setting it up this way allows me to do it. So orchestrator's actually pretty good, and it works pretty good. It's pretty useful. It works hand in hand with how you're setting up your workflow, right? Whether it's parallel or sequential or whatever. So we could also do something like rank tiered. What this allows me to do is I could run the job based on some node attribute ranking, right? So I could kind of choose the order, right, on which, like, all of the nodes that I filtered by, this will tell it the order to select the nodes. So by default, Rundeck is going to put the nodes in alphabetical order by name, and that's how it chooses the order when we're running one node at a time. But in this case, we could actually choose, right, the order in which we're running the jobs if we had a use case like that. So I can kind of think of one as like if you had a data lake type environment and you needed to start the nodes in a certain order, right? You could rank all of those nodes, say like Cassandra nodes, in the order that they should be restarted. And then it will restart, wait for the restart to happen, right? And go on to the next node in that order. Likewise, you can also do some type of ranking. I've seen people who, they want to target their least busy machine, right? And you can use ranking if you've used health checks to kind of add the CPU as a node attribute. So the CPU usage, right? You could say target your least busy machines, etc. So last topic that I wanted to talk about today is actually when we have options, like what happens when the job is on a schedule, right? So I'm just gonna pick one of these jobs that I know has options. So in the case of this one, right, we have this running on a nightly schedule. And if we go into the job, edit this job, how does it know, with no user driving the job, how does it know which options to use? So if we look at the catalog options, right, what it's really rebuilding every night on its schedule is the partner, right? Because that is our default value, is to pick partner. So the default value is how it determines what options to use when it's on a schedule.